What's going on, muscle monsters? Alain Gonzalez here, and in this video I want to talk about bulking or cutting. Which one you should do first if your goal is to maximize muscle growth. Now, the reason this isn't cut and dry has to do with insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning. Ultimately, how efficient we are at building muscle versus how efficient we are at storing body fat. Someone who has a higher body fat percentage tends to become more efficient at storing body fat and less efficient at building muscle, where someone who's leaner is more efficient at building muscle tissue and less efficient at storing body fat. So first and foremost, let's talk to the beginner, right? The naturally skinny guy who has never lifted weights and is looking to put on some size. Now, the obvious answer is you should bulk, right? You're in the perfect position to build muscle maximally. If you, on the other hand, are an overweight or obese individual who wants to build muscle mass, well, it's not going to be that simple for you. Now, this doesn't mean that it's going to be more difficult to build muscle than it is for the skinny guy, but for you, I would recommend that first we bring your body fat down to about the 10 to 12% range. Okay, and the reason we want to do this, again, is because right now, as it stands, you are in a position where you are more efficiently going to store body fat than build muscle. And building muscle typically will require at least a slight caloric surplus. And if you're in a slight caloric surplus and you're already overweight, then you're not going to be maximizing muscle growth. You will be gaining some muscle, but you're also going to be storing more fat, which further increases your body fat percentage, which further makes it easier for you to store more fat and harder for you to build more muscle. So for you, I would recommend actually starting off with a cut, right? Starting off at a deficit of about 250 to 500 calories. But here's the good news, is that if you are a beginner and you're just starting off in your weightlifting journey, you're still going to be able to build muscle tissue while you're in that deficit. So don't be afraid that if you go into a caloric deficit, that you're going to only be able to, get skinny and not lean, right? And when I say skinny versus lean, I just mean, less body fat but no muscle, right? Lean, we would probably envision someone who has, less body fat and some muscle definition, right? So again, if you're overweight, I would say anywhere above 20%, and you're just starting out, I might start you off at a slight deficit so that you can burn that fat that's not serving you, put yourself in a position where you're more efficient at building muscle, right? And at the same time building muscle while you're in the deficit, because you're in a magical time in your training where you're gonna be able to do both at the same time. Now, if you're someone who's just overweight and you've already been lifting for a while, then don't expect to make much progress in terms of muscle gain. But still, we want to put you in a deficit. We want to get you cutting so that you can get down to more optimal body fat percentage, right? A more optimal body fat percentage so that you can, again, put yourself in a position where you're building muscle more efficiently. Now, if you are skinny fat, meaning that, maybe when you're wearing a shirt, you look skinny, but when you take it off, you notice there's some fat around typically the midsection area that, you want to get rid of. Here's what I'd recommend for you, right? Because just because you're skinny fat doesn't mean that your body fat percentage is too high. Although that can be the case, it's not necessarily the case, right? So a lot of people will tell you, hey, you've got some belly fat that you gotta lose first before you can start focusing on building muscle if you wanna do it optimally, right? But when we talk about insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning, that has more to do with overall body fat percentage, not just a little bit of fat around a certain area. So for you, what I would recommend is, first and foremost, just understanding, are you really skinny fat, or are you just fat and have, you know, thinner arms? Because there's a big difference. Maybe I'll post some pictures here so you can get an idea. You know, one is skinny fat, and the other is someone who hasn't been lifting and isn't necessarily a quote-unquote obese or fat person, but they'd still be a higher body fat percentage and probably should start off with at least a slight caloric deficit. Now, if you're actually skinny fat, meaning that you obviously haven't been lifting for long or at all, right? You are actually thin, but do hold a bit of belly fat or fat around maybe the midsection or love handles and things of that nature, then what I would recommend is either training while eating at maintenance, right? Because again, because you're a beginner, you're in a special phase in your training or stage in your training where you're gonna be able to burn some fat and build some muscle at the same time, all right? And if you're at maintenance, this is going to give you enough nutrients to support and sustain muscle growth, right? Without putting you into too much of a surplus so that you're gaining more unwanted fat. If you are skinny fat, but maybe on the lower end of the spectrum, right? Because there's levels to this, then I would recommend maybe starting off at a slight surplus, maybe 100 to 250 calories. What this is going to do is, again, ensure that you're maximizing muscle growth while not putting on too much unnecessary fat. In fact, if you're a beginner, you may end up leaner because you are, again, in that special stage in your training where you can burn some fat while you are in at least a slight surplus. Another thing worth mentioning is that when you've got more muscle on your frame, it becomes a bit easier to cut down, okay? And this is specifically for you, skinny fat guys who are thin, but they have a bit of fat that they want to get rid of, right? You want to put yourself in a position where it's easier to burn off that bit of body fat, and you want to do this by building muscle mass. Not because it's more metabolically active, although that does help, but because the habits that you're creating while you're building your body are going to kind of spill over into your cutting phase. For example, someone who takes their training seriously and follows a solid diet might eat a lot of lean proteins. They might eat a lot of complex carbs, fruits and veggies and things of that nature, and getting into the habit of eating quote unquote healthier, right? Or having healthier food options or making healthier food choices is going to ultimately make it easier for you to cut. Not to mention that you're already in the habit of going to the gym, training hard, so that makes it a bit easier to stay in that caloric deficit. So just to give you kind of not a one size fits all, but just something you can kind of look at and say, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what I need to do. If you are 12% body fat or under, then you should probably be bulking up, all right? Whether you go with a lean bulk or a quote unquote dirty bulk, I'll leave that completely up to you. I actually did a video on why I don't recommend dirty bulking, right? Unless maybe you're a naturally skinny beginner, all right? So I'll link that in the description. Make sure you watch that first if you are considering a dirty bulk, okay? If you are between, let's say, 12 and 15, I'd still say a lean bulk is probably your best bet. But once you hit that 17 to 20% mark, right, you're going to become less efficient at building muscle, more efficient at storing body fat, and it's probably a good time to cut. So if you're at 17% or above, it's probably a good time to cut. And you want to cut down to at least 12%. That's going to put you in a good position to build muscle maximally. All right, so I hope that was helpful. If it was, click the like button below. Do not forget to subscribe for more videos. If you have any questions regarding this topic, leave them in the comment section below. And till next time, peace.